The sound of Italian leather meeting flesh echoed through the marble atrium like a gunshot. Zelma Russell, 8 months pregnant, wearing a waitress apron over her white button-down, crumpled to the polished floor of Seoul's most exclusive mall, her hands instinctively shielding the life growing inside her. Above her stood Kang Min-ho, her ex-fiancé, his designer shoe still raised, a twisted smile of satisfaction on his face. "I told you you'd end up serving people like me," he sneered, adjusting his expensive suit while his new heiress fiancé watched with cold indifference. What Min-ho didn't know, what no one in that crowd filming on their phones knew, was that the simple silver bracelet on Zelma's wrist had just sent a silent alarm to the most dangerous man in Seoul. Her husband, the head of the Shadow Dragon Syndicate. And he was in a boardroom just 3 floors above. The Starfield Mall in Gangnam is where Seoul's elite come to display their wealth. Crystal chandeliers hang from 40-foot ceilings. Every store is a brand name that costs more than most people's monthly salary. And on the 3rd-floor cafe terrace, surrounded by spilled coffee and shattered porcelain, Zelma Russell lay gasping, her dark skin contrasting against the stark white marble, her ponytail disheveled from the fall. The crowd froze. Phones rose like a forest of glass and metal recording. No one moved to help. This is the first lesson you need to understand: bystander apathy. Min-ho played to his audience, while his new fiancée, Park Ji-yoon, standing behind him in her white power suit, clutching her luxury handbag. He was performing, asserting dominance, making sure this pregnant woman, this woman who dared to leave him 2 years ago, knew her place in his world. "Look at you," he spat, circling her like a predator. "I gave you everything, designer clothes, a penthouse view, my family name, and you threw it away to... what? Serve coffee?" Zelma's breath came in short gasps, her hand pressed against her swollen belly, feeling for movement. "Please be okay. Please." The temperature drops. Then something shifted. The air in the mall changed. It wasn't physical, not at first, but everyone felt it. Like the moment before a thunderstorm when the pressure drops and every animal knows to seek shelter. The mall's steel security shutters began descending over every exit with a mechanical grinding sound. The main entrance, the side doors, the emergency exits, all sealing simultaneously. People looked around, confused. Murmurs spread through the crowd, and then they heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, measured, the rhythm of absolute confidence. The crowd began to part instinctively, bodies moving before minds could process why. Like the Red Sea splitting before Moses, a pathway opened through hundreds of shoppers, all of them suddenly unable to meet the eyes of the man approaching. "Enter the Shadow Dragon." Suk Jun-seo emerged from the crowd like death personified. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal black suit tailored so precisely it looked like it was part of his skin. Not a single strand of his styled back hair was out of place. His face showed no panic, no rage, no emotion at all, just cold, focused calculation. His eyes locked onto Min-ho with the fixed stare of an apex predator that has already decided its prey is dead. It's just a matter of how. Here's your second lesson. True power doesn't need to announce itself. Min-ho had kicked and screamed and peacocked. Jun-seo simply walked. Yet everyone in that mall, from the security guards to the store owners to Min-ho's own fiancé, recognized which man held real authority. Jun-seo's hands hung relaxed at his sides, but trained eyes would notice they were positioned perfectly to draw a weapon or deliver a strike in a fraction of a second. He moved with what martial artists call lethal grace, every step purposeful, every muscle ready, like a coiled spring. The crowd's recording phones were now trembling in shaking hands. Min-ho, still standing over Zelma, finally looked up. His arrogant smile faltered. Recognition flickered across his face, not of the man, but of something primordial. The same instinct that tells a deer it's being watched by a wolf. The moment before, everything changes. Junseo reached Zelma, and without acknowledging Minho's existence, knelt beside his wife. His large hand, scarred from years in the underworld, gently touched her face, brushing away tears. "Jagia," he whispered, his voice soft as silk and sharp as a blade. "Are you hurt? What, is our baby?" The tenderness in his voice terrified the crowd more than any threat could have. Zelma nodded slightly. I think we're okay." Junseo's jaw tightened. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. The crowd would later say it looked like he was praying, but those who knew him understood. He was deciding whether to be a husband or a monster. When his eyes opened, the decision was made. He stood slowly, finally turning his gaze to Minho, and asked in a voice that made the temperature drop another 10 degrees, "Who touched my wife?" Minho laughed nervously. It was the laugh of a man who doesn't yet understand he's already dead. Your wife?" He looked at Zelma, then back at Junseo, then at Zelma's waitress apron. This is some kind of joke, right?" Park Ji-yoon's eyes went wide. Her expensive handbag slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a muffled thud. She knew that face. She knew that name. Every business person in Seoul knew that name. And her fiancé had just assaulted his wife. Junseo didn't repeat the question. He simply looked at Director Han, the head of mall security, who was now standing at attention at the edge of the crowd. "Lock it down," Junseo said quietly. "No one leaves until this is resolved." The psychological trap snaps shut. This is your third lesson. The best revenge doesn't start with violence. It starts with removing all exits. Junseo wasn't going to beat Minho. He was going to systematically dismantle every pillar of his identity while the world watched. Minho was about to learn what happens when you kick someone who owns the ground you're standing on. What he was about to experience is called social death, when your reputation, your status, and your entire constructed identity are obliterated in front of everyone who ever respected you. Psychologists say it can be more devastating than physical harm because it destroys not just your present, but your future. The cameras were still recording, the exits were sealed, and Suk Junseo's men were already moving into position around the perimeter. The real punishment was about to begin. Now, before we see exactly how Junseo destroys Minho's entire life, I need to ask you something. If you're still watching without subscribing, you're basically like the crowd that stood there filming instead of helping Zelma. Don't be a bystander. Hit that subscribe button. Prove you're not part of the problem. Because what happens next is going to teach you the real cost of underestimating people, and you'll want to remember these lessons. Bystander apathy. Psychologists call it the diffusion of responsibility. When everyone assumes someone else will act, so no one does. It's why people can be murdered in crowded streets with witnesses everywhere, yet no one intervenes. The more people present, the less likely any individual is to help. Remember this. It explains why evil so often thrives in plain sight. Minho played to his audience, his new fiancée Park Ji-yoon standing behind him in her white power suit, clutching her luxury handbag. He was performing, asserting dominance. Making sure this pregnant woman, this woman who dared to leave him 2 years ago, knew her place in his world. "Look at you," he spat, circling her like a predator. "I gave you everything. Designer clothes, a penthouse view, my family name, and you threw it away to... What? Serve coffee?" Zelma's breath came in short gasps, her hand pressed against her swollen belly, feeling for movement. "Please be okay, please." 3 minutes earlier, she'd been wiping down tables, checking on her staff. The Z-Line Cafe was one of 12 restaurants she secretly owned in this mall, but no one knew that. She worked these shifts herself twice a month, undercover, to understand what her employees experienced, to feel what they felt, to catch the managers who abused their power. Min-ho had spotted her from the escalator. His eyes had lit up with cruel delight. Zelma? Zelma Russell? He'd approached with that same arrogant swagger she remembered from 2 years ago when she'd broken off their engagement. "Oh my God, you actually did end up as a waitress. I told my mother you'd crash and burn without me." She'd tried to walk away, tried to de-escalate, but Min-ho grabbed her arm, spun her around. Park Ji-yoon giggled behind her hand. "You're pregnant?" Min-ho's face twisted with disgust. "Let me guess. Knocked up by some line cook? Living in some cramped apartment in Itaewon? This is perfect. Ji-yoon, baby, look at this. This is what happens when women think they're too good for—" "Let go of me, Min-ho." "Or what?" His grip tightened. "You'll sue me? With what money? You'll call the police? You think they care about some pregnant waitress?" That's when Zelma had felt it. The old anger. The old fear. The pattern she'd escaped. Min-ho's abuse had never been just physical. It had been psychological. Death by 1,000 cuts. Comments about her weight, her accent, her exotic skin that was beautiful but hard to dress. The way he'd isolate her from friends, then blame her for being lonely. She'd left him the day he'd raised his hand to her face during an argument about her wanting to work. She'd packed her bags that night and never looked back. And then, 3 months later, bleeding in an alley after a robbery gone wrong, she'd met Jun Seo. But Min-ho didn't know any of that. He only saw what he wanted to see. A defeated woman. A victim. Someone he could still control. "You should thank me," he'd said, shoving her backward. "I'm teaching you humility." Zelma stumbled, her pregnant belly throwing off her balance. But she crashed into a table, sending cups and saucers flying. Pain shot through her side. And that's when Min-ho kicked her. Not hard enough to kill, he wasn't that stupid, but hard enough to hurt, hard enough to humiliate. His shoe connected with her shin, then her hip as she fell, and for one terrible moment, his foot hovered near her stomach before he pulled back, laughing. "Oops," he said. "Not sorry at all. You should be more careful. Pregnant women shouldn't be on their feet so much." Zelma's vision blurred with tears, not from the pain, though that was real, but from rage, from the injustice of it, from the knowledge that every person recording this on their phones would share it, comment on it, maybe even laugh at it, but not one of them would help. Her hand found the silver bracelet on her wrist, the one Jun Seo had given her on their wedding day. "If you ever need me," he'd said, "press this. I don't care if I'm in a meeting with the president. I don't care if I'm in another country. I will come." She pressed it. The tiny button was disguised as a clasp. It sent a silent GPS alert and activated an emergency protocol that Jun Seo's entire organization knew meant one thing. The Queen was in danger. Predators choose victims based on perceived vulnerability. Min-ho targeted Zelma because he thought she was alone, powerless and friendless. He didn't bother to investigate her current life. He just assumed his narrative was true. This is called confirmation bias. He believed she was nothing, so he only saw evidence that confirmed that belief. It's the same reason abusers often target people again after relationships end. They cannot conceive that their victims have grown, changed, or found protection. Remember this when you hear people say, "Why didn't they just leave?" Leaving is just the beginning. The danger often escalates after. Min-ho was still talking, performing for the crowd when the temperature dropped. It started as a feeling, that primal, ancient sense that predators are real and you are prey. The air in the mall changed. People stopped browsing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the background music seemed to fade. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, measured. The rhythm of absolute confidence. The crowd at the far end of the mall began to part instinctively, bodies moving before minds could process why. Like the Red Sea splitting before Moses, a pathway opened through hundreds of shoppers, all of them suddenly unable to meet the eyes of the man approaching. Suk Junseo emerged from the crowd like death personified. Tall, broad-shouldered, his charcoal black suit tailored so precisely it looked like it was part of his skin. Not a single strand of his styled back hair was out of place. His face showed no panic, no rage, no emotion at all, just cold, focused calculation. His eyes locked onto Min-ho with the fixed stare of an apex predator that has already decided its prey is dead. It's just a matter of how. True power doesn't need to announce itself. Watch how people move around someone and you'll understand their real status. Min-ho had kicked and screamed and peacocked. Junzeo simply walked. Yet everyone in that mall, from the security guards to the store owners to Min-ho's own fiancé, recognized which man held real authority. This is what behavioral psychologists call nonverbal dominance. It's in the posture, the gait, the micro-expressions. Predators recognize other predators, and prey recognize both. Junseo's hands hung relaxed at his sides, but trained eyes would notice they were positioned perfectly to draw a weapon or deliver a strike in a fraction of a second. He moved with what martial artists call lethal grace, every step purposeful, every muscle ready, like a coiled spring. The crowd's recording phones were now trembling and shaking hands. A woman near the front whispered, "Oh God, that's Suk Junseo." Another voice, barely audible, "The Shadow Dragon. Why is he here? Someone's about to die." Min-ho, still standing over Zelma, finally looked up. His arrogant smile faltered. Recognition flickered across his face, not of the man, but of something primordial. The same instinct that tells a deer it's being watched by a wolf. Park Ji-yoon's eyes went wide. Her expensive handbag slipped from her fingers and hit the marble floor with a muffled thud. She knew that face. She knew that name. Every business person in Seoul knew that name, and her fiancé had just assaulted his wife. Junseo reached Zelma, and without acknowledging Min-ho's existence, knelt beside his wife. His large hand, scarred from years in the underworld, gently touched her face, brushing away tears. "Jagiya," he whispered, his voice soft as silk and sharp as a blade. "Are you hurt? Is our baby?" The tenderness in his voice terrified the crowd more than any threat could have. The most dangerous people are those who have something to lose. A man with nothing is reckless. A man with everything is careful. But a man who has everything and sees it threatened, that man becomes a force of nature. Junseo's softness toward Zelma wasn't weakness. It was the eye of a hurricane, the calm that precedes total destruction. Zelma nodded slightly, wincing. I think we're okay. The baby's moving." Junseo's jaw tightened. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. The crowd would later say it looked like he was praying, but those who knew him understood. He was deciding whether to be a husband or a monster. When his eyes opened, the decision was made. He stood slowly, finally turning his gaze to Min-ho, and asked in a voice that made the temperature drop another 10 degrees, "Who touched my wife?" Min-ho laughed nervously. It was the laugh of a man who doesn't yet understand he's already dead. Your wife?" He looked at Zelma, then back at Junseo, then at Zelma's waitress apron. This is some kind of joke, right? She's a waitress. She's nobody. I will ask one more time." Junseo's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Who touched my wife?" The crowd held its collective breath. Min-ho's brain finally started working. He looked around for support, found none. Even Ji-yoon had backed away from him, hands raised as if to say, "I'm not with him." Look, there's been a misunderstanding," Min-ho stammered. "I didn't know she was she bumped into me. He's lying," a voice called out from the crowd. An elderly woman, a regular customer at the cafe. "I saw everything. He pushed her. He kicked her while she was on the ground." Other voices joined in. "I recorded it." He called her names. He was bragging about it to his girlfriend. Minho's face went white. Shut up! All of you shut up! Do you know who my father is? Do you know what family I come from? Junseo tilted his head slightly, like a cat examining a mouse. Do you know who I am? Minho swallowed hard. I know the rumors, but those are just... You're just a businessman. You can't just... Junseo turned his head slightly, not even looking at anyone in particular, and said one word, lockdown. The sound was immediate and absolute. By steel security shutters, the kind used to protect high-value stores during riots, began descending over every exit in the mall. The main entrance, the side doors, the emergency exits, the parking garage entrances, all sealing simultaneously with a mechanical grinding sound that echoed like a death knell. People screamed. Some ran toward the exits, only to find them already sealed. Others pulled out their phones, trying to call the police, only to find their signals jammed. Control of the environment is control of the outcome. Junseo didn't start with violence. He started by removing all exits. This is a principle used in everything from military tactics to negotiation strategy. It's called controlling the battle space. When your opponent can't escape, they can't regroup, they can't call for help, and they can't pretend they have options. They must face you on your terms. This is why abusers isolate victims. This is why dictators control information. And this is why Junseo just became the most terrifying man in Seoul. Junseo didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Director Han, head of mall security and one of Junseo's many legitimate employees, appeared at his elbow. Sir? The mall is closed until I say otherwise. No one enters. No one leaves. Police are not to be called. If they show up anyway, you know what to tell them. Yes, sir. Bring 2 chairs and place them in the center atrium. Mr. Kang and his companion will sit and wait for me there. If either of them attempts to leave, break their legs. Director Han nodded and gestured to his team. 4 massive security guards materialized from the crowd and surrounded Minho and Ji-yoon. Wait! Minho's voice cracked. You can't do this! This is illegal! This is kidnapping! Junseo finally looked directly at him. It was like being seen by a shark. You put your hands on a pregnant woman, on my pregnant woman. You kicked her while she was on the ground. And you think you get to lecture me about what's legal? I'll call the police. Please do. Junseo's smile was colder than winter in Siberia. I'd love to see what they say when I show them the footage of you assaulting my wife. In Korea, assault of a pregnant woman carries a sentence of up to 7 years. Add in the fact that you did it in public, and that you're currently under investigation for embezzling from your own father's company. Yes, I know about that. And I'd say you're looking at a decade minimum. Minho's face went from white to green. How do you... I know everything about you, Kang Minho. I know you've been stealing from Kang Enterprises to fund your gambling habit. I know your father is about to cut you off. I know you're only marrying Miss Park because her father promised to bail you out. And I know... Junseo leaned in close. His voice dropping to a whisper only Minho could hear. That the private loan shark who saved your family's company last month? That's mine, too. You literally just kicked your own creditor's wife. Minho's legs gave out. The security guards caught him before he hit the ground and dragged him toward the center atrium. Ji-yoon tried to speak. Mr. Suk, Junseo held up one hand. You watched. You laughed. You are complicit. Sit. She sat. Junseo returned to Zelma, who was being helped to her feet by 2 female staff members. Can you walk, Jagia? I think so. Junseo, please don't... Shh. He cupped her face in his hands. You're going to the medical suite. Dr. Yoon is already on his way. I need to make sure you and our son are safe. Then I'll deal with this. Don't kill him. Junseo's expression didn't change. I won't. Junseo, I promise, I won't kill him. He kissed her forehead gently. But I will teach him. The medical suite was on the 5th floor, tucked away behind the executive offices. It was technically a first aid station according to the mall's public directory, but in reality, it was a fully equipped private clinic with surgical capabilities. Junseo had paid for it himself when he'd bought 60% of the mall's shares 3 years ago. Dr. Yoon, an older man with steady hands and the kind of discretion that came from years of treating gunshot wounds without asking questions, was already waiting with a nurse and a portable ultrasound machine. "Mrs. Suk," he bowed respectfully, "let's get you on the table." Zelma was helped onto the examination table, her waitress apron finally removed. Beneath it, her belly was swollen and round. We stretched tight with the life inside. Dr. Yoon began his examination with practiced efficiency. Junseo stood by the door motionless, his eyes never leaving his wife. His hands, which had been so relaxed before, were now clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white. "Tell me," Zelma said softly while Dr. Yoon worked. "Tell you what? Tell me what you're thinking. I can see it in your face. You're deciding how much pain to inflict." Junseo was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you remember the night we met?" Of course she did. How could she forget? 2 years ago. Zelma had been working the late shift at a different restaurant, a small, family-owned place in Itaewon. It was past midnight. The streets were empty except for occasional drunk salarymen stumbling home. She'd been taking out the trash when she heard the sound. A low groan, barely human. In the alley behind the restaurant, she'd found him. A man in an expensive suit, blood soaking through the fabric at his side, his face pale with blood loss. Any sane person would have called the police and run. But Zelma had seen too much violence in her own life to abandon someone dying. And something about the way he looked at her, not demanding, not entitled, just exhausted and resigned to death, made her kneel beside him. "Stay with me," she'd said, pressing her apron against his wound. "I'm calling an ambulance." His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "No police, no hospital." "You're bleeding out." "I know." He'd actually smiled. "Bad night, wrong place, rival gang." You're Yakuza? Mafia?" Something like that. His eyes were already starting to close. "If you call the cops, I'm dead anyway, either from this wound or from them finding me." Zelma had made a decision in that moment that would change her life forever. She'd dragged him, a man twice her weight, into the restaurant's back room. She'd used the first aid kit meant for kitchen burns and cuts to stop the bleeding. She'd stitched him up with the kind of careful precision she'd learned from YouTube videos watched during her pre-med days before she'd dropped out to escape Minho's control. Junseo had passed out from the pain, which was probably for the best. When he woke up 6 hours later, dawn was breaking, and Zelma was sitting beside him with a bowl of soup. "You should eat," she'd said. "You lost a lot of blood." He'd stared at her like she was an alien. Why did you help me?" "Because you were dying." "I could be dangerous." "You are dangerous, but you're also hurt. Those aren't mutually exclusive." He'd eaten the soup in silence. Then, "What's your name?" "Zelma Russell." I don't want to know. Safer that way." But he'd told her anyway. "Suk Junseo, and I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything. Just try to get shot less." He'd laughed, actually laughed, and winced from the pain of it. "I'll try." He'd left that morning with a promise. "If you ever need anything, I'll come." She'd assumed she'd never see him again, but 2 weeks later he'd returned to the restaurant, not bleeding this time, dressed in a perfect suit looking like he owned the world. He'd sat at the counter and ordered coffee. "You came back," Zelma had said, surprised. "I wanted to pay you. For the medical care." "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" She'd considered. "Conversation. I want to know why someone like you does what you do." So they'd talked. Every week he'd come back. They'd talk about everything. Philosophy, history, her dreams of running her own business, his complicated relationship with power and violence. He'd told her about growing up in the underworld, about taking over his father's organization, about the weight of responsibility. And somewhere in those conversations, they'd fallen in love. 6 months later, he'd proposed, not with fanfare or public displays, but quietly, in that same back room where she'd saved his life. "I'm not a good man," he'd said. "I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more. But with you, I want to be better. I want to build something that isn't just blood and fear. Marry me." She'd said yes. Back to the present. "I remember," Zelma said softly, watching Junseo's face. "You told me you'd never let anyone hurt me the way he did." "And I failed." Junseo's voice was hollow. "You were on the ground, pregnant with our son, and I wasn't there. But you came. The moment I called, you came." "Not fast enough." Dr. Yoon looked up from the ultrasound screen. "The baby is fine. Strong heartbeat. No signs of distress. Mrs. Suk, you're going to have some bruising on your hip and shin, but there's no damage to the uterus. You and your son are very lucky." The tension in Junseo's shoulders released, just slightly. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. She should rest for a few days, keep weight off that leg, and avoid stress. But both of them will be fine." "Thank you, doctor." Zelma reached for Junseo's hand. "See? We're okay. Now please, when you go back down there, remember, he's not worth becoming a monster for." Junseo's face was unreadable. "I'm already a monster, Jagia. I've just been pretending otherwise for you." "Then keep pretending. For me. For our son." She squeezed his hand. "Don't kill him. Just teach him. Make sure he never does this to anyone else." Junseo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll teach him. I promise." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, then her belly where their son grew. "Rest. I'll be back soon." As he walked toward the door, Zelma called out, "Junseo?" He turned. "Make sure he understands. Not just that he hurt me, but that he can't do this to anyone, ever." Junseo's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Oh, he'll understand. The whole world will understand." Revenge isn't about violence. It's about teaching. The best revenge doesn't destroy the person. It destroys their ability to hurt others. It removes their power, their platform, their protection. It exposes them for what they really are. What Junseo was about to do wasn't murder. It was education, and Minho was about to get the most expensive lesson of his life. Junseo walked back toward the atrium, and with every step, the mall seemed to grow quieter. People pressed themselves against walls. Store owners closed their doors. Even the ambient music had been cut. In the center of the atrium, under the grand crystal chandelier, sat Minho and Ji-yoon in 2 chairs, surrounded by Junseo's men. They looked like defendants awaiting sentencing, and in a way, they were. Junseo had promised Zelma he wouldn't kill Minho, but he'd never promised Minho would survive what came next. Junseo emerged from the elevator and walked back into the atrium with the same unhurried pace that had terrified the crowd before. Every eye was on him. Every phone was still recording. He'd made sure of that. Director Han had specifically instructed security not to confiscate devices. What was about to happen needed witnesses. Minho sat in his chair, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity, but his leg bounced nervously. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Ji-yoon sat beside him, perfectly still, her eyes calculating her next move. Junseo stopped about 10 feet away from them and pulled out his phone. He didn't say anything. He simply made a call, put it on speaker, and waited. A voice answered on the second ring. "Yes." "Aye, sir?" "Execute Protocol 7 on Kang Minho. Full spectrum." "Understood, sir. Beginning now." Junseo ended the call and slipped his phone back into his pocket. Then he checked his watch. 15 seconds, he said to no one in particular. Minho frowned, confused. "What are you—" His phone buzzed, then buzzed again. then began vibrating continuously like a swarm of angry bees. With shaking hands, Minho pulled it out and looked at the screen. His face went from confused to pale to absolutely ashen. No, 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 no! He frantically swiped through notification after notification. Your account ending in 4782 has been frozen due to suspicious activity. Your credit card ending in 9021 has been declined. Your access to Kang Enterprises corporate accounts has been revoked. Your lease at Gangnam Tower Apartments has been terminated for breach of contract. Your vehicle registration has been flagged for immediate repossession. Your membership at Paradise Club has been permanently revoked. In the modern world, power isn't just physical, it's digital. Your entire life exists as data in systems you don't control. Your bank accounts, your credit, your property, your reputation, all of it can be dismantled with a phone call if you anger someone with the right connections. This is what cybersecurity experts call a coordinated infrastructure attack. Jun Seo wasn't just wealthy. He had access to the systems that run society, and he just used them to erase Minho's existence. What did you do? Minho's voice cracked. What did you do? Jun Seo's expression remained neutral. I made some calls. You see, when you have the kind of influence I have, you learn that everything is connected. Your bank? I know the chairman. We play golf together. Your credit card company? I own 30% of their shares. Your apartment building? That's owned by a subsidiary of a company that owes me a rather large favor. Your car? Leased through a dealership that I provided startup capital for. Minho's phone continued to buzz. More notifications, more destruction. Your employment at Kang Enterprises has been terminated effective immediately. Your father has requested you vacate the family home within 48 hours. Your photograph has been shared with all luxury establishments in Gangnam. You are no longer welcome. My father... Minho tried to call, but the line went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Voicemail. He's not answering. Why isn't he answering? Because I'm sitting in a meeting with him right now, Jun Seo said calmly. Well, my associate is. Showing him the evidence of your embezzlement, the gambling debts, the forgery. Turns out you've been stealing from your family for almost 2 years. Your father is a proud man, Mr. Kang. Learning his son is not only a thief but also the kind of man who kicks pregnant women. That's too much shame for a man like him to bear. You can't do this. I just did. Abusers rely on protection, family money, social status, institutional indifference. Remove the protection and they become what they always were. Cowards. Minho's violence came from a place of assumed invulnerability. He thought his father's money, his family name, and society's general apathy toward violence against women would shield him from consequences. Jun Seo just removed that shield. This is called consequences enforcement, and it's the only thing that actually changes behavior. Minho stood up, panicked, and one of Jun Seo's men immediately pushed him back down. Sit. Ji-yoon... Minho turned to his fiancée desperately. Ji-yoon, call your father. He can fix this. Your family has connections. Tell him... Ji-yoon was already standing. She smoothed her white suit, picked up her handbag from where she'd dropped it, and looked at Minho like he was a stranger. We're done. What? You heard me. We're done. She turned to Jun Seo and bowed deeply, a formal bow of apology and respect. Mr. Suk, I sincerely apologize for my involvement in this incident. I had no idea that that Mrs. Suk was... She swallowed hard. I was not informed of the situation. Had I known, I would never have... You would never have what? Jun Seo's voice was ice. Stood by while your boyfriend assaulted a pregnant woman? Or would you have simply done it more quietly? Ji-yoon's face flushed. I made a mistake in judgment. You made a choice. You chose to laugh. You chose complicity. Jun Seo gestured to his men. Escort Miss Park to the exit. Make sure every luxury brand in this mall knows her face. She is not to be served in any establishment I have influence over, which, Miss Park, is most of them. You can't. I can, and I will. You wanted to marry into power, Miss Park. Let this be a lesson. There are levels to power you cannot even comprehend, and you just made an enemy of someone on a level you will never reach. 2 security guards stepped forward. Ji-yoon looked at Min-ho one last time, not with regret, but with disgust that she'd hitched her wagon to such a spectacular failure and then allowed herself to be escorted away. Min-ho watched her go, his last ally abandoning him, and something in him broke. "Please," he whispered. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll pay. Stand up!" Min-ho stood on shaking legs. Junseo addressed the crowd, his voice carrying through the silent atrium. "Most of you have your phones out. You've been recording since this started. Good. I want you to keep recording. I want this to spread. I want everyone to see what happens when you touch what's mine." He turned slowly, making eye contact with different people in the crowd. "The woman who was assaulted today, the woman this man kicked while she was pregnant and defenseless, is not just my wife. She is Zelma Russell Suk, the owner of Z-Line Restaurant Group. Every cafe, every restaurant, every food establishment in this mall with a Z in its logo, she owns them. She wasn't working as a waitress because she was poor. She was working because she cares about her employees, because she wanted to understand their struggles, because she has the kind of empathy this man," he gestured at Min-ho, "will never possess." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People pulled out their phones, searching for Z-Line Restaurant Group. The search results showed a multi-million-dollar company with locations across Seoul, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. "She built that empire from nothing," Junseo continued. "While men like Mr. Kang here were coasting on their father's names, she was working 3 jobs to fund her first restaurant. While he was gambling away his inheritance, she was learning how to run a business. And when she met me, she didn't want my money. She wanted to build something herself. So I helped her. I invested. I provided connections. And together, we built something legitimate. The best revenge is success. Zelma didn't need Junseo to save her economically. She'd already saved herself. But abusers like Min-ho cannot imagine their victims succeeding without them. They need to believe they were the prize, the catch, the irreplaceable one. Destroying that narrative, showing them that not only did their victims survive, but they thrived, is psychological devastation. This is why living well is the best revenge isn't just a saying, it's a weapon." Min-ho was crying now, understanding the full magnitude of his mistake. He hadn't just kicked a pregnant woman. He'd kicked a pregnant wealthy woman married to the most dangerous man in Seoul who owned his debt. Junseo stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Min-ho could hear, though the nearest phones still picked it up. "You called her nobody. You said she'd ended up serving people like you, but here's the truth, Mr. Kang. You were always beneath her. She left you not because she failed, but because she knew she deserved better. And she was right." He stepped back, addressing the crowd again. "Under normal circumstances, Mr. Kang would be in a basement right now, learning what happens when you disrespect the Shadow Dragon organization. But my wife, who is a better person than I will ever be, asked me to show mercy. So I'm going to give Mr. Kang a choice." Junseo gestured, and 2 of his men stepped forward. One was dressed in a suit, clearly private security. The other wore a police uniform, but it was immediately clear from the way he deferred to Junseo that this officer was on someone's payroll. "Option 1, Junseo said. "You can come with me to the basement. We'll have a private conversation about respect, consequences, and pain. You'll leave alive, I promised my wife, but you will leave changed. Option 2, you can go with Officer Park here to the police station. You'll be charged with assault of a pregnant woman, which in Korea carries up to 7 years in prison. You'll also be charged with embezzlement based on evidence your father is currently providing to investigators. And you'll be sued in civil court by my wife for damages, emotional distress, and loss of income. The civil suit alone will bankrupt whatever's left of your family." Min-ho looked between the 2 options, both of them nightmares. That's not a choice. That's not fair. Fair? Junseo's laugh was devoid of humor. You kicked my pregnant wife and you're talking to me about fair? You have 5 seconds to choose. 5, 4, 3. Police! I choose police. Minho collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Please, just let me go to the police. I'll confess everything. I'll plead guilty. Just don't take me to the basement. Abusers are fundamentally cowards. They punch down, never up. They target the vulnerable because they can't handle real resistance. The moment Minho faced actual consequences, the moment he faced someone more powerful than him, he crumbled. This is why it's so important to support victims in pressing charges, in speaking out, in standing up. Abusers rely on silence and fear. Break the silence, remove the fear, and they have nothing. Junseo nodded to Officer Park, who stepped forward with handcuffs. Kang Minho, you're under arrest for assault. You have the right to remain silent. As Minho was cuffed and led away, still crying, Junseo addressed the crowd one final time. Let this be a lesson. I don't care who you are, how much money your family has, or what connections you think you possess. If you harm the innocent, if you abuse the vulnerable, if you think your status puts you above consequences, you will learn otherwise, and the lesson will be expensive. The steel shutters began to rise. The mall was open again. People began to disperse, immediately uploading their videos, texting their friends, spreading the story. By nightfall, it would be national news. By morning, international. The hashtag Shadow Dragon Justice would trend for 3 days straight. But Junseo didn't care about any of that. He returned to the medical suite where Zelma was resting, kicked off his shoes, and lay down beside her on the medical bed, careful not to jostle her injured leg. Is it done? She asked softly. It's done. He chose police. Good. She turned to face him, her hand finding his. Well, you kept your promise. I always keep my promises to you. I know, she smiled. That's why I married you. They lay there in comfortable silence, her hand on her belly, his hand covering hers, feeling their son kick and turn, unbothered by the chaos his parents had just orchestrated. He's going to have quite a story to tell when he's older, Zelma mused. We'll leave some parts out. Just some? Junseo kissed her forehead. Just some. 1 week later, Zelma Russell Suck returned to the Starfield Mall. But she didn't arrive in a waitress uniform. She arrived in a custom-tailored emerald dress that accommodated her pregnant belly while still commanding absolute attention. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, was styled in elegant curls. She wore heels, low ones, given her condition, but designer nonetheless. And on her arm was Junseo, looking every bit the dangerous power player he was. They walked through the main entrance, and the entire mall seemed to stop and watch. People bowed. Store owners came to their doorways to show respect. This was no longer the hidden queen working in secret. This was the queen of the mall, and everyone knew it. Zelma walked directly to the security office on the 3rd floor. Director Han met her at the door, looking nervous. Mrs. Sook, how can I— The security footage from last week. Pull it up. He did. The assault played on the large monitors. Zelma watched herself fall, watched Minho kick her, watched the crowd film and do nothing. Freeze it there, she said. Now I want you to identify every mall security employee visible in that frame. Director Han shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Suck. Now. He pointed them out. 3 security guards visible in the frame. All 3 had watched. None had intervened. They're fired, Zelma said simply. Effective immediately. Final paycheck by end of day. Severance is forfeited due to failure to perform basic job duties, specifically protecting mall patrons from assault. Yes, ma'am. Now show me the footage from the wider angle, the one that shows the service corridor. The camera angle changed. In this view, you could see someone moving against the flow of the crowd, not running away from the scene but toward it. An older man in a janitor's uniform pushing his cart aside, reaching for his radio to call for help, trying to push through the crowd. Who is that? That's Mr. Park. He's one of our maintenance staff. Been with us for 15 years. He tried to help. Yes, ma'am. He was calling for security when Mr. Suck arrived and handled the situation. Zelma nodded. Promote him. I want him as supervisor of the maintenance department. Double his current salary. And I want it announced to all mall staff exactly why he was promoted, because when everyone else was filming or watching or hiding, he tried to help. Incentivize the behavior you want to see. If you want a society where people help instead of film, where people intervene instead of walk away, you have to reward those who do. Mr. Park risked his job by intervening in what could have been a domestic dispute or customer conflict. He chose to help anyway. That choice needs to be celebrated, rewarded, and held up as the standard. This is how culture changes, not through lectures but through consequences and rewards that align with your values. Director Hahn made a note. Consider it done, ma'am. Zelma turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. I want a new policy implemented immediately. Any mall employee who witnesses assault, harassment, or violence and fails to intervene or call for help will be immediately terminated. Any employee who does intervene will receive a bonus and commendation. Teach your staff that this mall is a safe place because we make it safe, not because we hope it will be. Yes, ma'am. I'll have it in writing by tomorrow. Zelma and Junseo walked out of the security office. As they strolled through the mall, Zelma stopped at her cafe, the one where she'd been working when Min-ho attacked her. The staff was different now. Word had gotten out about her real identity, and everyone was nervous. She walked behind the counter, picked up an apron, and tied it over her expensive dress. Mrs. Suck, you don't have to... The manager started. I know I don't have to. I want to. She smiled at the staff. I built this company by understanding what you do. That doesn't change just because everyone knows who I am now. So let's get to work. We have customers waiting. Junseo watched from a corner table, a slight smile on his face. This was who she was. This was why he'd fallen in love with her. She could have stayed in a penthouse, could have played the role of mob wife, could have let him handle everything. But she chose to build. She chose to work. She chose to be more than just his shadow. And that, he thought, was true power. So what did we learn from Zelma and Junseo's story? Let's recap the lessons. 1. The bystander effect is real and deadly. When everyone assumes someone else will help, no one helps. Be the person who intervenes. 2. Predators choose victims based on perceived vulnerability. They rely on assumptions. Never assume you know someone's full story. 3. True power doesn't announce itself. It's shown through actions, respect, and control without force. 4. The most dangerous people are those protecting what they love. Never threaten someone's family if you don't know what they're capable of. 5. Control the environment. Control the outcome. Remove your opponent's exits and options. 6. In the modern world, power is digital. Your entire life exists as data that can be dismantled by those with access. 7. Abusers rely on protection. Family, money, status. Remove it and they're revealed as cowards. 8. The best revenge is success. Build a life so good that your abuser's narrative about you becomes laughable. 9. Abusers are fundamentally cowards who punch down, never up. They crumble when faced with real consequences. 10. Incentivize the behavior you want to see. Reward those who help. Punish those who enable violence through inaction. These aren't just lessons from a story. These are principles you can apply to your real life. Whether you're dealing with workplace bullies, toxic relationships, or just navigating a world that often rewards bad behavior, remember what Zelma and Junseo taught us. Build your power in silence. Protect what matters. And when someone underestimates you, make sure the lesson they learn is permanent. Now, if this story taught you something, if it made you think differently about power, justice, or standing up to bullies, then do something about it. Hit that like button right now, not just because it helps the algorithm, but because you're voting for more stories that actually teach you something valuable. You're saying, yes, I want content that makes me smarter, not just entertained. Subscribe if you believe that stories should have meaning, that every minute you spend watching should give you something you can use, because that's what we do here. We tell stories that educate while they thrill. And comment below, what's the biggest lesson you're taking from Zelma's story? Have you ever underestimated someone only to realize too late who they really were? Or have you been underestimated? Share your story. Let's build a community of people who understand that real power isn't about violence. It's about protection, preparation, and proving people wrong by succeeding beyond their wildest imagination. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's being underestimated, someone who's rebuilding after leaving an abusive relationship, someone who needs to remember that their past doesn't define their future, share this video with them. Be the person who helps, not the person who just watches, because at the end of the day, we all have a choice. We can be Minho, arrogant, cruel, underestimating others until we're destroyed by our own ignorance. We can be the crowd, filming, watching, doing nothing. Or we can be Zelma, building our power quietly, helping others, and rising above every person who ever doubted us. Which one will you be? See you